So we're looking at the engine compartment of the 76 Corvette we're doing the refresh on, and we're going to take the body off of the frame. So we're disconnecting everything that connects the body to the frame, and today we're going to address the steering column. So let me see if I can get the camera down in there. There's the steering box that's attached to the frame. This is the steering coupler, sometimes referred to as a rag joint because of this fiber disc in here that makes it somewhat less than rigid. It really doesn't have any play in it. But there are two bolts to this thing. One right here. See if I can zoom in a little closer. One right here that connects it to the shaft of the steering gear. And then one over here that connects it to the actual steering column. What I like to do when I do these, first of all, I'm gonna hit them with some blaster so that they'll be hopefully loosened up. Looks like the one that's on the steering gear already has some grease that's leaked out of the. Okay, come on. I've tried to use this. There it comes finally. I've tried to use an oil can. I bought blaster in bulk, and they gave me a spray bottle, and I've been trying to use an oil can that has a pump on it to get it actually into places that are more accurate than the spray can they gave me. That just shoots a stream. So hopefully I'm getting enough on here that it will loosen the rust bonding from the steering column. When I took these out of my 74, it wasn't too bad. It looks like these things are in a blind hole, the bolts, so that water and rust can only form from the one side. That generally makes them a little bit better to get off. The reason I loosen both of these bolts before I pull the steering column is once I've got them loose, I really don't care which end comes off first. Either way, I can get the steering column out, whether I have the coupler on the column or whether it stays on the steering gear. Really doesn't matter as long as I can get the steering column out. So now that I've hit that with blaster, it will have some time to soak while I do some other stuff. So right down in there is one of those Mickey Mouse ear clips that holds the cable that goes to the steering wheel lock. When you put it in park and take the key out, it will lock the steering wheel so that you can't turn it. Now, it's connected to a pin up there that has a cotter pin in it. I'm obviously going to have to put the camera down because I'm having to hold it with two hands to hold it steady. But to get that out, I'll just take a pair of needle nose pliers, bend it straight, stick one in through the hole, and try and yank it out. Maybe I can get this Mickey Mouse ear off left-handed with a pair of pliers while I hold the camera. obviously once you get it to that point, you can get your pliers down in it and you can work it if you got both hands free, that is. You can work it out of there better. My hand's going to be in the way. Okay. There it is. Now, once I get the cotter pin off and get that cable free, that hole is big enough for it to drop down. If I can focus on it, you can see that it's okay, and actually that gave me some room to work. By dropping that out of there, the cotter pin is now lower. It's easier to see and I'll be able to reach it better. I'm not even going to try to take that out with one hand, so I'm going to shut the video off now and remove that. So there's the cotter pin, and it may have been easier if I would have left that bottom cable, the Mickey Mouse ears, in there and shifted the gear to lower it. But right now, as you can see, hope I got it on film, but it was attached to that. I just pulled it off and the whole cable just dropped down. And so I will retrieve that, put the clips back on it so they're not lost, and I'll know what goes where to hold it on. So that's the cable that locks the steering wheel. I'll get a little closer to it. This is the end that goes to the lever on the steering column that actually does the locking. That goes to the bracket to hold the cable in place. On the other end, it bolts to the transmission at the pan, and that cable gets attached to the shift linkage. While that blaster is soaking on that rag joint, I'm going to start taking the trim off on the inside underneath the steering column to gain access to the screws you need to remove to take out the column. So there's 3 Phillips screws holding a panel here. And then this is an override for the headlights. I forget exactly how it works, but you can put them down or up by taking that off, or turning that, I should say. And there's an air conditioning vent under here that has to come out so that you can get to the screws that hold the steering column to the firewall. And I'm going to have to see what I've got to do to take that off. Okay, I found what appears to be a 3/8" screw up on the left-hand side, attached to a metal bracket that's riveted to that duct. That is, if I can tell my sizes. No, not good at telling my sizes standing on my head. Go one lower. And that's not right either. Okay, there's a little screw under there attached to a metal bracket. This is going to be one of the rare times I edit something out. I tried a 3/8 and 11/16 socket on it. Neither of those fit. So I'm going to delete that clip. There's also, and this is not standard I'm sure, but there's looks to be a terminal, a wiring terminal attached to that. Looks like it was grounding something, and there's no wire attached to it, so I don't have any idea what it was trying to ground. But okay, now that I'm doing this, I would recommend taking this bolt out first before you take that cover off, because then you don't have this in your way, and it is accessible. But when you can't see the air conditioning duct to begin with, you don't know that. Okay, there's that wire terminal. As usual, this is not something that's going to come out easy. Pushing it the wrong way. You got to push it towards the side of the car, not the center of the car, and it will come off of this end, and then it's attached. You got to push it towards the front of the car. And this end comes off of this ball vent over here. I don't know if you can see the ball vent, but that piece just attaches the vent under here to the ball vent. show you the ball vent on the other side of the car. Just attaches to the back of that. This is the piece of air conditioning vent that was under there. This attached to the ball vent. This is where it was screwed in. It was a 5/16 socket I used on that, by the way. A deep one is better, or a small one will do with a short extension. And then this just went over top of the vent inside under the dash. So I'm going to show you what's under the dashboard here that I'm going to be working on. Ignore this. This is my light. But hard to fit under here. So there's a big wiring connector right there. And this is a tab that needs to be pulled out. Let's see if you can see it. This tab needs to be pulled out because that locks it in. So that needs to be pulled out while you're pulling the connector off. I'm showing you that now because I'm sure I can't do it with one hand. And then what holds the steering column to the firewall, you can find the thing. There's a plate there. Try to steady my hand here. There's a plate there with 2 bolts. They're on studs. The studs are attached to the plate on the other side of the firewall that completes the mounting. Now this one over here I can get to with my favorite trick, a long extension, but the other one is a little bit too far up for just a straight long extension. So I'm going to show you a trick that I'm going to try to use to get that off. And then after I get all that stuff off, there are underneath the steering column, there's 2 bolts holding it up. Those are right underneath where I took that trim piece off. So let's start taking it apart. A little screwdriver, I'm going to try to get under that tab to remove that wiring connector, wiring harness. Hopefully it goes well. It's pretty far under there. I wonder if I'm pushing the wrong way. Might be that the one that has that clip lifts off of the, yep, it does. Pretty easy when you do it the right way. So that came off easy once I did it the right way. The upper clip, the part with the clip on it, actually goes up. Okay, now with my favorite trick of the long extension, I can get on that bottom bolt. Bolt came off and dropped somewhere behind my floor mat. Okay, now the other one is a little more of a problem because you don't have a straight shot in. So I am going to use U-joint on the end of the socket to get up in there. Okay, 1/2 inch is what those nuts are. So the problem with these U-joints is they tend to want to do this, and that makes it hard, especially if you have limited space to work in. So here's a trick. Tape. I'm going to put this black tape, which will stretch a little bit and bend a little bit, but it will keep the U-joint more or less stable so that that doesn't fall. Then once I get it on there, because the black tape is somewhat flexible, it will allow me to turn this nut and have the flex in it that I need to keep it on the nut and be able to turn it. Thing is way up under there. I may need to put some more black tape on that because it's trying to wobble on me anyway. Slipped off of the nut. It's most of the way off. little more black tape on that would have helped make it more rigid. If I could reach up under there with my hand now, I'll take it off. Yep. So once again, that super long extension is a real labor saver. That's hard enough being in there on your knees. I probably should have put the lift up and made it so I could stand up and just look in, but somebody who's doing it without the benefit of a lift would have to do what I did. So I have to assess what my next step is. So this is what was on the engine side of the firewall, and these were the two nuts I just took off. That one is attached to this bracket. This other one is not, and the reason it's not is because you can't get this whole bracket out beyond that lever for the steering wheel lock with these two studs in there. But by removing this one, you can wiggle it out. Okay, this is the place where the cable to the transmission goes through, and then your bracket is up here. So that is disconnected on the firewall side. Looks like the two screws that hold the bottom of the steering wheel up are 9/16. So I'm going to get a 9/16 socket and remove those. As usual, I put the screws back in the holes where they belong, nuts on the studs where they belong. I attach the cable that goes to the transmission the way it belongs so that when I go to put it back together, I'll at least have an idea where everything goes. I'm going to disconnect I'm going to take the bolts out of the rag joint. And again, this is another place where a long socket or a long extension on your ratchet gives you a nice room to work. This is a 7/16 12-point socket. Gotta have a 12-point socket. Now, I'm a little bit nervous about this 12-point socket because, well, maybe I have one in another toolbox, but my 12-point 7/16 on my 3/8 drive ratchet got lost or something. I bought a new one. I bought a 6-point. I'm not sure this 1/2-inch drive will fit in there. But there's the bolt. Now, because I've got the steering wheel, well, actually now I have it locked because I have that lever in that upward position. And now I can't get it unlocked. Oh, I can't get it unlocked because I don't have the key in it. I just took the key out. So I have to unlock it with the key. And so that I can turn the steering column so I get at least attempt to get the socket on. This is easy to do because I have the car up on jack stands and the wheels are off, so I can turn the column from right there. So both of these came out without a problem. That's a good thing. Not sure why, but I didn't have a problem on my 74 with this either, so I don't know what's different about those and other rusty bolts, but it would appear that those come out pretty easily. Now, I can't separate this yet because I have to be able to pull the steering wheel back, and the steering wheel still is being held in by those two bolts underneath the steering column. So that's the next step, is to take those off. I believe those are 9/16 bolts that hold that in. So that's what I've got here. They are 9/16. I believe there are another couple of connectors attached to the steering wheel. There's a lot of wires that go up to the ignition switch, which actually the key here pushes the rod. The ignition switch is down on the column. So if you ever need to change the ignition switch on C3 Corvette, that is probably where it is. This is going to hit me in the head when it comes out. Okay. Let's see if it'll come off of that rag joint. That came off the rag joint, or it was just the steering column extended, because it is an adjustable steering column flat. Forget the term for it now. And the steering column came out of the rag joint. So now all we got to do is make sure we don't have any more harnesses up there, and we do. So I'm going to take the camera off the tripod and show you what's going on over here. So this is the steering column from the top. This is the rod that I was saying goes to the ignition switch, which is actually right there and has a couple of wiring harnesses going to it. And let me see if I can show you how it moves when I turn the key. There you can see it. It doesn't move very much, but that's what actually turns your ignition on and off. Now, as I was taking that other connector off, I told you I pushed it up. Here is the connector, if I can. That's light's reflecting off my screen. I can't tell what I'm showing you. So that right there is the connector that I pushed up when I released that tab, and it came off of this row of, unfortunately, let's see if I can get some more light on it, this row of connectors right here. Now, the ignition switch, if I recall correctly, there's a couple or three connectors there that all have to be taken out, and I forget the combination, but I know that once you figure it out, it's not too difficult to do. I'll be back with a report when I figure it out. Okay, I don't know whether you're going to be able to see this, but you can see it started to come out already. But what you have to do is right in the center of this, on the back side underneath, right under there is a tab that you have to push up and pull out on this connector. The problem that makes it difficult is if you've got big hands, mine aren't exceptionally big, but there's not much room for you to get in there with your hand to grab that. So what I'm going to try to do now that I've got it started a little bit is take this screwdriver and insert it in that. Come on. I'll try to take this screwdriver and insert it in that gap back there and put some leverage on it while I'm pressing the tab from the back side. So that gap right there. Well, unfortunately, well, I don't think I can do it with one hand. There is a trick to this. There's actually two clips here. There's a black one in the back, and if I can there's a couple of locks here. I pushed in on them pulled the black one out. Okay. Maybe those were going the wrong way. Maybe I should have been pulling them out. At any rate, I got the back one out first. And then it seems easier to reach around and get the white one that's in the front. It came off fairly easy. So that's all separated. Now, let's see if I can get a picture of up under here. And no, I can't because it's covered by that plate in the back there. That plate back there. But there's a trick to getting the steering column through the firewall. That arm that the arm that locks the steering column, the steering wheel, there's a slot that it fits through, and there might be actually insulation and such. Actually, I'm already past that. The arm went through. Let's see if I can get the camera down there and get a shot of the slot. Let's see if I can get some light on it. The arm, yeah, the arm is through. It's hard to see it from this angle, but the arm already came through that slot. So that arm, if you've got the steering wheel in anything but the lock position, that arm, it's not going through. So I believe everything is disconnected now. All that remains is to just pull that back through the brake and gas pedal on that. That might be a hang up. You might have to wiggle it through. But I'll set up the camera on the tripod from the other side and go ahead and yank that out. Okay, I'm going to see if I can wiggle that out from between the pedals. Get my lights situated so that I can see what I'm doing somewhat. So it tends to get caught in all the insulation in your carpet. Floor mats, carpet, stuff like that. that tab that locks the steering wheel is caught behind the insulation. That's what's causing me some difficulty here. I had to twist it so that it got from behind the insulation. So there's the steering column, and now that I'm thinking about it, I think when I did the 74, I unscrewed the ignition switch, and that's what allowed me to find those tabs on the connectors that go into the ignition switch. What that leaves you with, though, is you have to adjust the ignition switch to the key whenever you put it back in. So hopefully by not disconnecting that this time, I won't have to do that. So one of the things that was making it a little bit difficult for me to get that out was these floor mats. It was hung up under the back of that floor mat, so anything you can get out of the way before you do that is going to be to your advantage. Now that I've got the steering column out, it's going to be pretty easy for me to take this panel off the dashboard, the driver's side, because the steering column's in the way if you have the steering wheel on there. So while I have it off, that's part of what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the tack out and do some diagnostics on it, see if I need a new circuit board or whether my problem is actually in the distributor. I should say the coil of the distributor. But that tachometer broke on me several years ago, and it's such a job to get it out that I haven't bothered to fix it, especially since it's an automatic and it shifts by itself. What do you need a tack for?